which is the best piece of meat in the shop? And he said, they're all the best piece of meat. And people ask me, which is your favorite student? They're all my favorite student. But one student in particular, and today we have one of the truly great visual impairment teachers. So this is a true story. Kind of hard to believe, but she was the VI teacher and I was the mobility teacher. So we get a young child. She's been adjudicated to White Mountain Juvenile Facility. She was kicked out because she kicked out every window on the first floor. So they sent her home with an ankle bracelet. So she comes to TUSD. She comes in a cop car, and the cops, she's handcuffed. She gets out of the car with a big cop on each side. She comes into one of the portables at Rosemont, and she's sitting down. There's 27 people in the room, psychologists, juvenile officers, speech, psychologists, and this little criminal looks like Alice in Wonderland. And she sits there, and because of her reputation, size, and nobody's making eye contact with her, but everybody's talking about her. And she's not deaf. And so she's there alone, and Kathy sits right in the chair to her left and says, what kind of books do you like to read? And she says, you know, she told you, and said, well, we can get those in large print or in Braille. And all of a sudden, this little criminal turns into a little girl. And in that moment, you made it possible for her to learn and for us to teach. And so I took her on a lesson to show her how to use a cane. And we're walking down the street near Rosemont, and there's a car here. So she takes her cane, walks around the car, and she's just using ambient sound that's reflecting from the car. So once she did that, and she didn't touch the car, she just wanted to let me know that Chino was there. So if that were the case, then when she's making a clockwise crossing, a counterclockwise crossing, there's a car here, she'll hear it and walk right around it. If there's a car making a left turn in front of her when she's making a clockwise crossing, she'll hear the sound behind the car, outline the car, and there'll be a space where there's no sound. So she'll just let the car go. So it was a hot day, so I said, you know, you haven't had lunch. Would you like a drink or something? So we go to McDonald's. And I said, you know, you can order. I said, would you like a Happy Meal? You know, I mean, you know, have a drink. So he said, well, you can order. So she goes, I like a hamburger, plain. Just the meat and the bun. Is that too much for your tiny brains? I'm like, and so, you know, some young girl, 16-year-old girl who's made 50,000, you know, hamburgers, slaps this thing together and squirts the stuff on it. So she gets it. And she takes the thing, she goes, she walks up, I want to see the manager. And then I'm sitting there going, you know, and the manager comes and she says, evidently it was too much for your tiny brains. You put mustard and ketchup on it. And so I realized that there were some challenges that were going to be going on. So as time went on, I taught her mobility. And I do a thing when the girls are seniors. I call it Dr. Bill's Finishing School. And we have a formal tea at the Sheraton. They break out all the silver and they set it up, they meet the manager and they get seated. So she's sitting down, here comes the waitress. Yeah, we can have lunch, it's late afternoon. And so she orders a hamburger. Waitress goes, would you like condiments on it? And she says, no. And the waitress goes, would you like them on the side? And she says, yes, thank you. I didn't know she was capable of saying thank you. And you have to understand that when Diane was doing her IEP, her individual educational plan, one of the goals was 40% less pirate language. And we ain't talking ARG. So, and wasn't that the goal? And 40% less pirate. So she finishes her meal and she asks to see the cook. And I'm going, so the cook comes out, he's a Japanese fellow, and she said, and my heart is in my mouth, I'm not breathing. She says, I'd like to thank you for what was the best hamburger in my life. Thank you very much. So she comes back to school, she's going to Dodge Middle School. So she gets back and she gets out of the car and she would take her cane and she would put it between her legs like a witch's broom and she'd hop, just because she knew it drove me nuts. So she's hopping along and she hits a Dodge truck mirror. Bam! Hits her right in the face. And the pirate language rolled. She came out with a verb phrase, an adjectival phrase, a future periphrastic with the separable phrasal verb, which, although obscene, I thought was quite clever. So, mom had a new boyfriend, so she went to California, majoring in ROTC. California, in its infinite wisdom, put a rifle in her hands. That's what we need. It was Marcy. Here's Marcy with a. So I didn't hear from her for several years, and then about 4 years later, I got an email saying, "Could you?" And she had gone through relationships. She had done sex, drugs, and rock and roll. She'd done the dark side, and she wanted to go to college. So I wrote her this glowing letter to get into college. Didn't hear from her for another about 4 or 5 years. And 3 days before Christmas, a few years later, I get this letter. "Dear Dr. Bill, I'm going to graduate from college. I'm going to be a cross-categorical teacher. I'm going to be the teacher who catches the kids who fall through the cracks, like you caught me. Thank you, love and mercy." That's the one I think of. So.